Don't cut yourself. Don't cut yourself. Don't cut us short. All right?
Alhamdulillah. I get
All
it.
right. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu wa rahmatullah. Okay, well, we will begin then. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And last week we talked about the tradition of Marcus Garvey, and it's a great jump off point for what we're going to get into today. So I'll do a quick little recap on that, not to take a long time. But the way that we set it up was by making the connection with making the connection with Garvey and the way that he was influenced by the generations that preceded him. And I think that's just such an important part of our work, and of course of the book Carry On Tradition, because that's what it is. It's a tradition. It's a tradition that has been so firmly established within our people. And even though this book begins the conversation in the year 1441, it's a tradition that precedes us by hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years. I'll give a quick little side story. So my wife, her family is from East Africa. Her family is from Eritrea. And many of us who are familiar with just the history of this world, especially the history of the human species, we know that, to the best of our knowledge right now, using archaeology, science, biology, the first peoples that make up our species of human beings, in the Islamic tradition and the cosmology of Islam, so like of insan, come out of the African continent, or what we refer to as the African continent, and that those people had, color, and using the 21st century terminology would be viewed as black. And then even in the description of Adam alayhi salam in Quran, he was Hamin Masnoon, and like the way that he was put together was a dark clay. All right, but like her genealogy, because her brother, she has an older brother, did their DNA. They are like 99.9% the same people from the same land for generations, like going back thousands and thousands of years. Our people have just been there, and they've mixed with their own people. Her generation is really the first generation that's been forced out of their homeland because of imperialism, colonization, and war. So when we get into that idea of tradition, like using her people as an example, they pass the same culture, language, practices, traditions down generation after generation after generation after generation for thousands and thousands of years. It's the same thing that's within us. Even though for many of us who are on this call, our people were stripped from our homelands, stripped from those cultural foundations, the linguistic foundations that we would have had being around our people, but we've held on to them in all the different ways that we could. And we've passed that on to the best of our ability, generation after generation after generation after generation. And one of those pieces, of course, is just knowledge of self and a knowledge of people and wanting to protect your family and your community. And so I love seeing that when I see it, because I feel that was a really, really prominent piece of my upbringing. Brothers and sisters who were out there on the front line, who then begin to have children. I come from that generation of those children, and seeing the examples that were set by my parents and my elders, and then those who have now ancestors, and them making a deliberate attempt to say, this is something that needs to be passed on to the next generation. So in my own personal, that's an important piece. But when we see it, and we see it so clearly in a beautiful way in the history that's in front of us, it's something that needs to be identified and highlighted. So when we talked about Garvey, we talked about him being born in Jamaica, which is another important part of this tradition piece that we're adding to the Rise experience here, because our people have been doing this globally. All right, then when we got into that part of the tradition being passed on, or one generation supporting the next generation. We talked about how Garvey, he traveled. So here on this slide that you can see in front of you, this is Garvey in the pictures from his UNIA days in the US. You see these faces that are in there, and a lot of the brothers and sisters who were in the UNIA in those early days when he was in Harlem, they came from various parts of the African diaspora because of migration patterns. So you had a whole bunch of brothers and sisters that were from the Caribbean, brothers and sisters that were from Central America, and you had, of course, brothers and sisters that were from the US. So you can see that just in the faces of these folks in this picture. It's a beautiful picture. But here on this slide, it says 1910, he traveled to Central America. So when he was there, he was interacting with folks and he learned from those communities. 1912, Garvey studied at Birkbeck College, University of London. And when he was there, I made a reference to him having an elder by the name of Duse Muhammad, who was also influential in the history of the Moorish Science Temple, and then becomes influential in the early history of the Nation of Islam too. And then comes back to Jamaica in 1914, when he establishes the UNIA, and the motto of the UNIA, one God, one aim, one destiny, one people, all of that. There are folks who will say that Duse Muhammad, who was a practicing Muslim and understood the power of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, a uniting creed within our tradition for more than 1,400 years, a uniting creed of unity, of Tawheed. They say that that knowledge inspires Marcus Garvey, who then, when he establishes his UNIA and comes up with a unifying creed, bases it on a message of unification, bringing the people together. And this goes into, like, I have my fist balled up. Y'all see the screen, but you might see me as well. I have my fist balled up right now because this is one of the messages that was, taught to us through self-defense, but then also through the Black Panther Party. Like, they would talk about why they use this as a symbol of power of the people. And they'd be like, all right, when you have your hand open, you have your individual digits, your individual fingers, that's strong too. Like, if you throw a slap at somebody using like the self-defense way that this is described, it's a powerful weapon. If you just use your open hand, you use your palm, it is a powerful weapon. But when you bring all of your digits together and you create the fist, it becomes that much stronger because you're unifying them. So when we unify ourselves with a common message, which is such an important part of just our tradition of Islam, that's why we have our congregational prayers. It's part of the wisdom, the hikmah behind Hajj, why it has to happen at a specific time, at a specific place, and we all have to gather, and we're doing the same things. We practice unity in our spiritual tradition. We practice unity in our communal traditions and our social traditions, especially within the Black tradition. And this represents that. But the information that he received from the community, from communities that came from different parts of the Black experience, the global Black experience, and especially from elders, I think is really important in the story of Garvey. So then, before he comes to the United States, he interacts with another elder from our tradition, and that is Booker T. Washington and the Tuskegee machine. And I wanted to highlight that because what we see in the UNIA with what the UNIA does, and I'm going to skip ahead to that, we see that in the foundation of what we're going to be talking about today when we introduce the conversation of the Nation of Islam. All right, so UNIA had a military wing, the African Legion, had the Black Cross nurses. So they had an organization, the larger organization of the UNIA, and then there was a contingent specifically for sisters. And so the Black Cross nurses, which then when we get into the Nation of Islam, we're going to see MGT, Muslim Girls Training, and other classes that are similar to what we see in the UNIA, but then you can also see similarities in that in the Tuskegee machine, in the way that Tuskegee was building itself out. Another piece that we highlighted, which was really important in the story of Garvey, which we're going to see as well when we get into the Nation of Islam, is we have to have a media channel, a way that we tell our story. And so Garvey had the experience of being an apprentice in a printing shop. He was around creating newspapers and putting information out into the community. And so they had the Negro World, and the Negro World was one of the most consumed pieces of Black media throughout the height of the power of the UNIA globally. You have people reading the Negro World in multiple parts of the world. And then you have the Negro Factories Corporation. So under that, grocery stores, restaurants, steam laundry, tailored dressmaking shops, millinery hat stores, publishing house, they own property. Of course, they had the Black Star Line. They did so many things together in terms of we want to control the resources within our community. And we want to be able to support our people with what we do. A lot of that example, Garvey got directly from the Tuskegee Institute and the Tuskegee machine being led by Booker T. Washington and, you know, his team of advisors, because they focused on, we're going to own property. We're going to build our own. You can't be a free people if you don't have control over your own food. You don't have your own property. You don't have your own buildings. How are you going to do that? You're completely dependent on the folks who are responsible for the oppression and the systems of enslavement for your survival. So building that example up was extremely, extremely important. And so as we move away from the UNIA, and then we get into our topic of conversation that we're introducing today, which is something that is very familiar to just about every single person on this call. I'm not exactly sure when all of you joined the community, if your days did start within the nation. I'm assuming that quite a few, that is the beginning for you. And for me, that's such a beautiful thing because of the honor in that tradition. Y'all being trailblazers for every generation of Muslims in this country, and not even just in this country, globally, but especially in this country that will come after. Like it's important. I'm somebody who I like to study. I like to look at things. And then of course I also like to take action. But one of my degrees when I was in college was comparative religious studies. And so I went to San Jose State years ago. San Jose State actually had a really good comparative religious studies program, like one of the top ranked programs in the country. And I think I benefited from that. So in the study of domestic religious experiences, there are very few traditions that you can say are like authentic representations of religions that were created here in what we call the United States. You can talk about the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, and then you can talk about the Nation of Islam. Then more recently, there's a Baha'i movement that you could say is almost indigenous to this place. But those two experiences, the Latter-day Saints and the nation, authentic traditions established here. And they're distinct as well because the Latter-day Saints established by white folks, the nation established by Black folks. And that's really, really important with how you build out something that's going to have a knowledge and understanding, a consciousness of the experience of a community and how to empower that community without having to deal with those oppressive, cultural, systemic and institutional realities that have been a part of what we're learning as we're getting when Imam Fahim is breaking down the knowledge and the wisdom of Imam Muhammad right now, like the making of the Negro, and then breaking that to move into the understanding of Bilalian. So this religious tradition was completely rooted in that formula of how we make that transition, and still had a political, cultural, and a spiritual impact because it came from Black people. So we jump into it. And in the book, the way that I put it in the book is I prominently place it within this tradition of So we already have 1441. We had all these other major uprisings and rebellions, individuals and organizations that have been fighting for the freedom and liberation of our people, and who have been prepared to fight for the freedom and the liberation of our people, and to build a new reality that protects the freedom and the liberation of our people and establishes a foundation for our people to thrive. There's no doubt about that, that the nation is a recipient of that tradition and an example of how we can be innovative in making that tradition real in the 20th century and moving into the 21st century in a beautiful, strong, and a powerful way. So the way that I did it was I created these images. So I'm gonna show you the images first. So if you haven't seen the book yet, yeah, you'll see these images. So I have this, and I do a general history, and on that first slide, and then I move here because I wanted to bring Malcolm into the story as an example of some of the figures that were produced by the nation. And there's no doubt about that, that Malcolm was a byproduct of that, as well as the UNIA. And then we go a little bit more into the legacy of Malcolm as he steps away from the nation. And then we bring it back to the legacy of the nation. And we continue because we have so many prominent figures that came from that. So more than just Malcolm. So as we have here, and this one talks about Sister Claire Muhammad. We have Malcolm. We have Muhammad Ali. We have Imam Muhammad right here. Clarence 13X. Louis X, who we know now as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So I have a breakdown of each one of them as part of that, showing the fruit, and we'll talk about the fruit of Islam as well, but showing some of the fruit that came from the nation in terms of individuals and individuals who have led communities as well. And so bring it back to the front of this part. And then I also want to do this. This was really interesting. I may have said this before, but it was interesting for me in the design of it, because each one of these images is an AI image. And comparing this image right here with what you see next, like this looks like a photorealistic image of a young Malcolm. And then in the background, there's a whole bunch of gibberish on there because I don't want people to mistake these for real photos. And I had this be an image that was generated using like pencil sketch. So when you get like real close up to it, you can see that it's a pencil sketch. It's not a photo, but it's a photorealistic pencil sketch. But when you compare this image to this image here, this one, it has more of an animated style because I wanted to be respectful of the tradition of the nation. And, you know, there's brothers and sisters that are still in the nation today, and the representations of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and not doing anything that was going to be offensive. So I created it, and I didn't want to have an image of Honorable Elijah Muhammad looking directly at the screen. But then when I was working this one, there were these faces in the background that came out a little distorted. And there was this face that was right here, like next to this microphone. I was like, nah, I need to adjust that. So I kept working on adjusting that face. And it came out like this. And when it did, I was like, whoa. To me, it reminded me of Imam Muhammad when he was younger. I was like, wow, that's a beautiful thing to capture. And for brothers and sisters in this community, I think that if you see it, you might recognize it, or you might see the same thing that I see in there. But to me, in terms of using the image as a powerful way to tell the story, to have the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to talk about the early history of the nation, and then immediately to his side in this picture is a representation of Imam Wadathuddin, who of course is going to assume the leadership and then move this community from the old teachings of the nation into the future of what this community becomes. I thought that was just a really beautiful, powerful, and like poetic thing that happened in the generation of this image. And those are the two faces that are really, really prominent in here. So that was something that came up. But then in the general conversation of this is stuff that Imam Fahim has already spoken to. So I'm not going to do too much on that. I'm going to go to the slides here. And this is from the presentations that I do with my young people in my programming. And what I go through here is, all right, so this will come up again when we go into the story of Malcolm, and I'll start wrapping up with this, how we talk about his parents. And when we talk about his parents, we have to state that his parents were both members of the UNIA. So Malcolm was raised in a family that had two Black radical political leaders who had a strong global cultural understanding of Blackness. And that was part of his early childhood before his father was killed, and then his mother was put into a mental institution. And then his family, he and his siblings were put into the system and parceled out, as he describes in his autobiography. But having that foundation, being connected to the UNIA, is really important. And then it comes back because when Malcolm is locked up in prison and his siblings are spending time with him, visiting with him, and they're like, hey, we have a way for you to get out of prison. And Malcolm's like, wait, what? What y'all got? You know what I'm saying? What hype, what scheme you gonna run for me to get out of prison? I'm ready. And, they did that because of the cultural knowledge of our community. They knew that if they spoke to him in that way, that was going to pique his interest. And then they can come back and they can drop this knowledge of the Nation of Islam on him. So they did that. And then they came back and they were like, there's this brother by the name of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he has a way to get you out of prison, the prison of your mind, of your body, all that language. And then one of the things that they said that really captured Malcolm was, this is like what our parents were doing. That's heavy, y'all. That's heavy. You know what I'm saying? Because that's my experience. That's my experience of seeing elders who were in a community movement, and they're passing that on. So his siblings understood the importance of saying, what we're doing now in the nation, this is like what our parents were doing when they were in the UNIA. And that was one of the hooks that got Malcolm to take steps closer to joining the Nation of Islam, because he remembered what his parents were doing. He remembered the power and the beauty of being involved in an organization that was focused on Black people culturally, spiritually, politically, and was fighting for the freedom and the liberation of our people. So in this story, when we talk about the real Malcolm X, we begin with Booker T. Washington. We then get into the UNIA, Marcus Garvey and the UNIA. We then get into Malcolm's parents because they were members of the UNIA. Then we transition into the story of Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. So, Honorable Elijah Muhammad, leader of the Nation of Islam from 33 to 75. We get into his early history, then becoming a member of the Nation of Islam. And as Imam Fahim points out, he learned about the nation because of his wife, Sister Clara. He's like, you need to go to these meetings. You need to see what these brothers and sisters are doing. And immediately after being in that space and seeing that, he never wavered from that path. So then establishes the nation after Fard Muhammad disappears, takes that leadership, expands on the nation. And then I get into this timeline because we're getting to Malcolm. So in 1952, all right, so yeah, here in this one, you have 1947. This is when Malcolm's brother, Wilfred, joins the nation. 1948, Malcolm's other brother, Reginald, begins teaching Malcolm about the Nation of Islam. And that was that whole conversation about, this is what our parents were doing. 1948, Malcolm begins writing letters to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and joins the nation. And then 1950, Honorable Elijah Muhammad continues to expand the Nation of Islam. 1952, Malcolm X is released from prison. And of course, he's released from prison into a strong Black community of the nation. And I think that's also a very important thing. when we support ourselves, we edify ourselves, it's important for those communities to be representative of who we are. And so he was in this oppressive institution of jail and prison. And many of us, it's fresh in our minds because of the brother that was just executed unfairly and unjustly. So we know what those systems are like. So to leave that place and then to go into a community space filled with so much love and richness and wellness, it's a beautiful thing, but it was a beautiful thing because that's what that community was building. So then with Honorable Elijah Muhammad leading the nation, folks like Malcolm in the nation, this is what we see at the height of its power. Multiple temples and mosques. Muhammad speaks, just like we saw with the UNIA in the Negro world. Now we got the final call. We have the Muslim Journal. You have schools, Muhammad University, Claire Muhammad schools. We have the Fruit of Islam, which is very similar to the African Legion. You have Muslim girls training in the general civilization classes, GCC classes. That's similar to what we saw with the Black Cross nurses. And then the economic program of the Nation of Islam, grocery stores, there was a bank, restaurants, properties. At the height of the power of the nation, more than 11,000 folks were employed. Some of y'all were selling fish. Some of y'all were selling papers. Some of y'all was working in various restaurants and doing other things on behalf of the economic program of the Nation of Islam. What does that do? When you control your own reality around you, you can be free. But when you don't, which is the reality of so much of our community today here in the United States, we are dependent upon our oppressors. So this is such a powerful example. And we continue to see those same things from the beginning of this story of 1441 into now, and especially in the example of the nation, the way that we're going to protect our community, we're going to build our community up, we're going to empower our community with this knowledge and this information that is going to help clean them up from what they've been through, because this is a message specifically for us in this time and place, which is so important. A message is effective because it speaks to the context that that person or those people are in. And then it has to be demonstrated. And there was a clear demonstrated example of the power of what these brothers and sisters were able to do collectively with a unified message, with a leadership structure. And the power of it is phenomenal, really. And it's hard to even quantify the power of it. And Imam Fahim has made some comments. I can't remember exactly what author he talked about, or somebody who said, if Islam is successful, like in just gaining more and more practitioners, especially practitioners that are influenced by this example here, then the person that you have to point to as the one who was the tipping point of that, it comes from the history of the nation. It's definitely Imam Muhammad, but Imam Muhammad is possible because of the history that preceded him with his father, Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the establishment of the Nation of Islam. So he's saying that it's due to Black people and Black people's practice of Islam in this place for this thing, if it becomes successful and it really transforms the culture of the United States and Western society, which is possible because we're the people. If it's going to happen in this place in the West, it's going to happen because of what Black people are doing. And this is the formula, because it's the formula that's been passed on generation after generation, and the Nation of Islam took it and refined it and made it that much more potent. And we are the beneficiaries of it because y'all were there and you're carrying that tradition on, and we're still benefiting from that formula and applying that formula in this present day. So that's why it has to be in there, the story of carry on tradition. And we are still carrying on this proud, beautiful, amazing tradition. So I'm gonna fall back, and Imam Fahim, I'm gonna pass it back to you, and then we'll just add a little bit more to it next week.
Get my camera and my mic on. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Such a blessing, Alhamdulillah. And the examples when we talk about the Malcolm Garveyite, Garvey, Booker T. Washington, when you make those connections, we can find and touch on and identify an unbroken stream to this movement. That's the idea, because when you think about how each segment, we know that Farad, he deliberately adapted, abstracted from the successful movements, and you can really see how much he drew on Marcus Garvey and United Negro Improvement Association. Just very clear. You make that clear, Tyson. But then when you have the Malcolm connection and the Garvey connection and Elijah Muhammad and the Malcolm connection and the Booker T. Washington and the Garvey connection, and you think about how each subsequent, I'm sorry, I have to use a movie illustration that's from I don't know, let's just call it fantasy science fiction, that the Denzel Washington, The Fallen, right? and uh and how the way that it was actually the shaitan, but I'm talking positive. The shaitan moved from one person to the other was just by contact. There was a touch, and so he would jump from one to the other. So I'm saying images like Nat Turner, ideas like Nat Turner, even Jack Johnson, Joe Louis, you know, all throughout our history, even if people weren't directly connected with these powerful figures, they were impacted by the the impact of these figures. So there are many people who were not a part of the Nation of Islam, but they were deeply influenced by the Nation of Islam, right? And so it was, but there are many people who didn't ride with Harriet Tubman or Nat Turner or Booker T. Washington or what have you, but the power of what Marcus Garvey, the power of what they did impacted all of us. And so by their by their luminance in the world, by their expression in the world, by their impact in the world, and the like. Even though we know, how Marcus Garvey was undermined in the COINTELPRO style of things, and also how Nat Turner, after what he done and how he went out, and but the impact of it went into the souls of the people, even who were not a part of those movements and in touch with those people directly. And I'm saying that line continues. That tradition it's in the bloodline, it's in the DNA, it is impact. Along with the trauma, there's the triumphant DNA. So there's the trauma piece, but there's the triumph piece that's in us, and that's what we're seeing through it all. That's what we're seeing through it all, and I'm really, really grateful that Tyson, you have this touch with it, because now we can, and that's the goal. That's the goal of this whole program and series, is to be in touch with that line, or reconnect with that line, and feel wholly connected and feel fully connected with that line, not in any kind of artificial way, but in a substantial, in a very real way. And alhamdulillah, carry on tradition actually makes that possible. Now, of course, my turn to make the contribution as we carry on here. All right, so okay, Tyson, you gotta shoot me back to being the co-host. I think I didn't flip it back. Check and see.
Just did.
Am I good?
Yeah, all good now.
Okay. Oh yeah, fantastic. All right. let's take this out. Okay. Let's go, Fahim. Let's see. All right. So many windows open. Don't know which one to look out of. All right. I think we're straight now. Come on. There used to be this commercial that says, I've got the slows. It was an oatmeal commercial. I think my computer has got the slows. Let's see what we can do here. Let's see. I see why people have production teams. Because you got to be the one-man band hitting the drum, and you got the cymbal and blowing the the harmonica. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for your patience. Alhamdulillah. Fortunately, the piece that winds up online, all this other stuff will be edited out, mashallah. But let's go. So today we're talking about Bilal's legacy and the transformation from Negrosis to Bilal. Okay. And I gotta watch out because this audio will start up on me again. Let's see. There we go. The archetypal, and everybody go ahead and mute yourself. I know I have my own problems with technology, but make sure your mic is muted. Today we're going to address the archetypal journey from oppression to empowerment, Bilal's legacy, and the transformation from Negrosis to Bilalian. And I want to reiterate, I have used, and I originally used the term Negrosis in kind of a poetic kind of uh, how can you say, even humorous kind of way. But this is we're past that now. We're literally addressing it from a psychological, even medical terminological perspective. This is a real condition, and we progress through what you call diagnosis, prognosis, and prescription, right? And the diagnosis is Negrosis. I mean, this is what is being suffered from, and that's what we detail. That's what we detailed last week, last couple of weeks. And so it's a real condition with real problems, and that really needs a real cure. And a cure has been established for it. And the label and the destiny and the objective of the cured individual is to be Bilalian in that sense. And this morning we're going to say more about it, but I do have to tell you, as I've said many times, listen, this is a long journey. When we're talking about a new master narrative for a whole people and for that whole people's history, there's no measuring of what kind of time they take. That's not to frighten you, but that's just to say, okay, we're still going to have to carry on with patience in this process too, because I'm treating it in a very serious and deliberate way. So in any case, this is where we are right now. So and the key terminology and the objective that we hope to reach is really understanding that terminology archetype as it relates to Bilal and as it relates to identity. So continuing. So this Ma'ruf and the freedom movement, I deliberately kind of had this vagueness in my imagery. I don't have the skill set that my co-host has, but the idea is to, these are simply images of some of the figures that have prominently impacted and who are a part of this social, spiritual, ethnic DNA that we're continuing to ride on and be driven by, and that we are learning how to express. This is all a part of that past, and the point that we want to make at this juncture is the ma'ruf. When we talk about ma'ruf, the Quran tells us ta'amaruna bil ma'ruf, ta'amaruna bil ma'ruf. And this ma'ruf is what is excellent in all periods of time. What is known to be humanly excellent, that is among whatever, whether it be Asian, whether it be African, whether it be European, these ma'ruf, these high level values, we see in the life, in that history, as Tyson talked about. It didn't just start in 1441. This is a very long history, but since we are more, I'll call it more local and even contemporary, even when we talk about 400 years, it's still more local and more contemporary, but there are expressions among and within these people and within this movement that has been a freedom movement from the time of the first oppressive enslavement circumstance, no matter where it happened globally. You find examples of courage, faith, self-empowerment, self-defense, self-direction, resistance, in every kind of courage and every kind of faith and every kind of resilience. We have embodiments of these qualities. There is someone in that people's history that is the icon of courage. They are the icon of faith. I'm going to point you to Mary McLeod Bethune, whose picture is here too. You want to see an icon of faith. Mary McLeod Bethune is an icon of faith. You really need to look at that. No doubt there are many other examples, right? You look at a Harriet Tubman as courage, and all these personalities, self-sacrifice. When you talk about a Nat Turner, and independence, when you talk about Booker T. Washington, and all these other things, George Washington Carver, who's there. He is a different kind of person in his connection. I'm talking his psychic connection with agriculture. So I'm saying this ma'ruf among these people, and I want to say this because, again, and we're going to get to this when we talk about human personality, ethnic personality. It's like, and it's wonderful. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Whatever is, like right now, I have on this piece that my brother El Haji Brahma went to New Jersey. Just started to say New Jersey, Nigeria, a phonetic crossover here. Nigeria, and he brought this piece back, and several others. He always, whenever he goes, he always brings something back, and I thank Allah for it and for him. So this is a Nigerian piece, right? So I'm saying everybody has their beauty, right? Literal geographic Africans have their beauty. Asians have their beauty. Alhamdulillah, I remember being in Malaysia, and I saw a Japanese Muslim. I just got to tell you, I just got to confess, this woman with kimar, she was absolutely angelically beautiful. I mean, just bang, really, really beautiful. And I'm saying, it's like when you see beauty, I mean, that is iconic beauty, right? In that frame, it's like, man, that's, when we went to Rome, I came to understand what olive skin actually meant. I would often hear people talk, well, she's olive skin. I mean, what the hell is that? What's it, olive? All the olives, all the olives I know, it would look like an alien or something, right? But then once you see them as a group, when you see around, when you see them, you say, oh, that's what olive skin is, right? What I'm trying to say. Everybody's beautiful. So sometimes, and this is a part of the negrosis that literally I have to address. A part of the negrosis is that there are some among this people who do come to al-Islam by the grace and the favor of Allah, becoming Muslim. But if you don't check that negrosis, you will think that all of the models of ma'aruf are only in the Arab history of the time and the generations from the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning that you have a companion, and we get the stories of the companions, and there's no way for me to disrespect the honor and the beauty and the grace and the blessing of these great companions that preserved the life of al-Islam and moved the life of al-Islam forward to where, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, by virtue of what they did, it reaches me now and I'm benefiting from it. But they are not as iconic as they can be and are, but they are not the only examples. I can go into my ethnic history and I can find an icon of courage that's just as strong as an icon of courage that you bring me from the 7th century in the lifetime of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of faith and of generosity and of independence and of whatever. Okay? And that's a part of this reclamation of your own original self and lifeline, where you say, shoot, I got models of courage in my history too. I have models and icons of self-empowerment and independence and charity and of faith. And I got those too. I don't have to look somewhere else for that. I don't have to look to Europe for that. I don't have to look to Asia for that. I don't have to look to Africa for that. I don't have to look anywhere other than the life of this people that have gone through what they have gone through and have survived even to this day and have thrived even to this day. It's upon that original nature. It's upon that substance that is a part of me. I don't have to look anywhere else other than in myself, and I can find hyper examples of everything that anybody wants to show me of this person's greatness. Alhamdulillah, Allah has made great people among every people. There are people whose story we don't even know, but they could tell us the story of the great figure that this is named after and that's named after, and the story of the, okay, I think you get where I'm going. And it's about connecting with that reality, and literally packaging it. And I'll go ahead and say it right now. It's like, look, Bilal packages all this energy and all this whatever you're feeling, you should feel right now. It's like Bilal, he's a package for all that. He's an iconic symbol. Let's move on. So, we went through, again, you got to go back episode 14, episode 13, and get some details. How did we get here? WD-40, Bilalian. You got to go back. So, mastertheworthing.org, and just follow, and also YouTube and Facebook. Just follow the titles. I think Negrosis is in, pardon me, the Negrosis is in the title also. But let's move on. And so we said, after all this history, we've come a long way in order to get to this point right here. So, but unfortunately, I can't go back over that. So, the prescription is WD-40 Bilaliania for the solution to the things that we're talking about, right? And these are the symptoms that it cures. It cures all symptoms of negrosis, including these. This is a short list, but it includes these: the internalized inferiority complex, the mistrust of one's own potential, the generational trauma retention. We're still holding on to that trauma. WD-40 Bilalianum cures that, right? The disconnected sense of cultural identity, the resilience, no, pardon me, the reliance on survival mechanisms instead of self-actualization. These are all pathologies that those who suffer negrosis have, all right? The perceived dependency on external validation or approval, emotional detachment or numbness towards our personal history, the difficulty in embracing our full humanity for rehumanization, the cognitive dissonance regarding the historical oppression, and the hesitation to pursue full intellectual or creative expression. These are all symptoms of negrosis. But if you get this WD-40 Bilalianium, it cures all of those symptoms. I'm not going to go through each one of them in detail, but it does so. And this actually comes out of what we had said before, last week's broadcast, actually. But let's continue. So why not Bilalian? So we're talking about Bilal as a label for the restored humanity of these people, right? Why not? Bilal is the archetype of liberation, whose life displays the character that serves an aspirational role for people of African descent living in the Western Hemisphere. You need to take that whole thing and say, okay, who is Bilal? What is Bilal? Why is Bilal important? Right? And Imam Muhammad gave us this way back. We just didn't hold on to it, represent it, and express it as fully as we should have then. It was the prescribed solution, but as it was, Imam Muhammad's light years ahead of us, and we weren't really ready for the solution, and to take that as something to be really, like you have a flag, like you have a flag, and you don't want it to touch the ground. Then Bilal should have been one of those. I'm sorry, I got a critical extra. So in any case, so Bilal is the archetype of this liberation. He's a symbol of, among other things, symbol of freedom, resilience, and spiritual leadership. Here's some of the qualities and attributes that we see in Bilal, the historical figure. He's an African. He's a son of slave parents. He's handsome and of impressive stature. He has and portrayed and lived out unbreakable faith in Allah under persecution. Bilal's status as the first muezzin and the first to call humanity to prayer. That is, see, that's the first time that iconic adhan was made. It was made by Bilal. Huh? He's known for his noble attributes, such as wisdom, dignity, self-esteem, honesty, humility, beautiful melodious voice. So it's like we're not trying, we don't need to teach the whole history and life. Go read about it. Go, there are videos of it, not necessarily the little animation thing that they try to flip that. Uh, I'm hearing it says some saying there's no sound. So Enrique, text in, let me know if you're getting sound now. It seems like sound should be good now.
Yeah, you're good. I can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay, so that I was looking at the Facebook Live piece. Okay, moving on. So in terms of that, so that history. So you want to get that history, you want to get more pages of that, do that because it's already there. You can get encyclopedic knowledge about Bilal. And when you do that, you'll be even more affirmed in supporting this appellation for us here. And this is the narrative. The name Bilalian, as articulated by Imam Muhammad, is more than just a label. Remember, we had in the series, I think it was last week, if not the week before, the idea you have to call things by their proper names. You have to call things by their proper name. And so, what is the proper name for this people who are moving out of and have been through what they've been through? Bilalian, right? So the name Bilalian, as articulated by Imam Muhammad, is more than just a label. It represents the spiritual and psychological healing that Al-Islam offers and the return to the natural foundations of human identity. Please understand this. That's the goal, to get back upon the foundation of original human identity. So through Bilal's legacy, African descended people can reclaim their cultural identity as well as a new identity rooted in faith. This identity is a direct response to the historical and psychological scars of slavery, offering a framework for individuals to reconnect with their physical, spiritual, and cultural heritage. The journey from Negro to Bilalian is one of restoration and empowerment. And this is really the thing. When we talk about being cut off, what were you cut off? You were cut off physically. How else were you cut off? You were cut off spiritually. How else were you cut off? You were cut off culturally. What were you being cut off from? You were cut off from your original human lifeline, the natural, as Tyson talked about his wife's heritage and it going back for thousands of years in that same geography. So whoever was scooped up and taken away from the land of their origins and brought over here, you were cut off. You were cut off from everything that it was. You were cut off from everything that it was. Everything that it was physically, you cut off. Everything that it was spiritually, you were cut off. Everything that it was culturally, you were cut off. Just get that straight. And that's just the separation. And I got to tell you something that's coming. Because just like my emphasis right here, right now, we need to understand anthropologically and biologically how, I'm talking science. I'm not engaging in just, unsupportable, implausible, beautiful rhetoric. I'm talking about bona fide scientific reality as to how we are a new people, a new species on the earth. That's a whole nother second. It's not going to come long after this Bilal sequencing that we have to cover, because the new species needs a new name anyway. It's like, no, you can't call it what you called everything else before. this is different. It needs another name. So that's also one of the reasons, whatever you've been calling it before, you can't call it the same thing now. You have to call it what it is as the new identified species. Okay? So when we talk about that total cutoff, and then you talk about the history that followed that cutoff, so who is those? See, that's a part of that Bilalian Ebonics, right? It's like, well, who are they? What are they? And what should they be called? I mean, who has gone through this, and therefore we can name them the same thing that we named them because their stuff is just like their stuff? No, this calls for a new